Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. So, leaders, we all want to be better at sales coaching, don't we? But sales coaching, not just for today, but for the future, as it's always changing out there. The art of selling is always evolving and changing. Well, I got to talk to a great leader who does sales coaching for today while training for the future. Phil Whitebloom joined me today, and Phil is going to talk about how you can create that longevity with your customers and keeping them for a long time, but keeping your team also consistently together. What's the importance of having a sales process when you are coaching? Where does training fall into that? And why do you need to be a great storyteller when it comes to selling and gelling? You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have a terrific leader with me today, and I am not going to waste any words because I want to get not only his story, but his advice for you out there, guys, is going to be so phenomenal, and I want to take advantage of his expertise. So the leader, and he does sales coaching for today while training for the future. Phil Whitebloom has joined me today. Phil, it is so great to connect with you. How you doing there, sir?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you inviting me to come here today. Your topic is right where I focus.
Oh my gosh, yes it is. And thank you. So let's get right to it. I love you're a servant leader and you've got a servant heart, and I love that about you. And talk about and that's really led you to doing what you're doing now. But I want to hear your backstory and what was that career path like that has led you to help so many leaders now today out there?
Well, it's started in sales. When I graduated college in 1980, I went directly into business. And my first job was a sales job, and selling office equipment in half of downtown Milwaukee. And it was dictation equipment for anybody out there who remembers what that might be. Um,
Yes.
but that's a podcast for another time.
Yeah.
So but I was in the office equipment. So I've been in the high tech area, and that was high tech back then. I've been in the high tech area my whole life, but I did so much within it. So I ended up there, and I moved on through, and I worked for NCR for a little while, which is then known as National Cash Register,
Yeah.
and I did really well there. And then I got recruited by Sony in 1986,
Wow.
and I stayed there until 2009. And that was my career. Retired from there. I took a voluntary retirement program from there in 2009. But while I was there, I started as a salesperson, and I worked all the way up through the management on the sales side. Regional sales manager, national sales manager, vice president of sales. But it wasn't on the consumer product side. It wasn't on the part of the company that sells to Best Buy and Walmart and those other retail giants. It was on the business to business side, which was business to government, business to corporate, business to houses of worship, sports, and other areas. So I did a tremendous amount in the 23 years there, and it gave me a lot of exposure. And I also managed other people and other teams and other managers during that time. Then continued on through after I retired from there, stayed in the same industry as VP of Sales and Marketing. Worked for a company based out of France and helped set up their U.S. operations here in the United States. Then COVID hit. And when I had left that other company, I was asked to work for an Israeli company for a while, and under a contract because they couldn't get into the country. And then I retired. I was done. I was retiring from corporate life, and I started this company as a hobby But when I focused it in on sales coaching, it resonated right away. And I all of a sudden had a business that I wasn't even set up for, no website, no nothing else, but I had clients.
Mm.
So I've been building ever since and growing the clients and building the infrastructure. And that's how I got here. That was a 40 some years in just about 3 minutes for you.
Yeah. That- what an amazing journey though, Phil. So what drove you to really help? What was it? Was there a turning point where you said that, "Hey, I'm just going to put everything to the side and I'm just going to help others get better"?
So it was an evolution. Actually, that isn't really any different than anything that I've ever done before, but I was never looking at it that way. It's just what I was doing. Um, Even before going to college, I was in organizations that helped other people, but sales is a natural. Sales actually the topic that I've been focusing on with my own clients and um, this time is that sales is about problem solving
Mm-hmm.
and you're solving problems to help others do better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a skill. You have to be empathetic, you have to be a good listener, you have to be an analytic thinker, a good presenter, and all these other things in order to accomplish that. Because if you don't listen and you don't solve problems, you don't have to worry about closing because there's going to
Yeah.
be nothing to close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So it was really natural for me. I had good mentors going along, but it was really about just always wanting to find a solution for something. And it turned out to be, I didn't realize it at the time, but in looking back and reviewing and stuff, why did I have some customers and clients for 30 plus years, regardless of where I was at? It was because um, I was always trying to help them. And then just to give you one example with a name, so I did a multi-year project for the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. I was actually the sales manager, I had a salesperson working for me who was
Mhm.
covering that, but it took a long time. And they would come to me once in a while and they would ask me to help them with things that at first I didn't sell. Sony didn't sell. I was working for Sony then. And I said, "You guys are making me nervous. Why are you asking me for this stuff and you know I don't have it?" They said, "Because we trust you and we know you don't have it, but we know you will help us find the right people to talk to that we could trust."
Wow.
That was quite a statement.
Yeah.
And it held all the way through from, I could name drop like crazy. I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
egotistical and arrogant, but it really isn't. It's my history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Working at the White House, with the White House Communications Agency through 6 presidents and doing things like that. Because these are career employees, they're not politicians.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing their job, and you're helping them to get their job done through sometimes challenging places.
Yeah. Phil, that's amazing. That was going to be my next question, actually, and you answered it. Was your longevity with not only customers but with employees as well that wanted to stay with you? That's a gift, man. That is something that a lot of folks can't say these days. What advice would you tell folks that are just starting out? As you know, a lot of I know in the wireless industry, a lot of companies as soon as a price dropped somewhere else, we're very quick to like jump from one carrier to the next. What's some of the secret ingredient? You talked about a few. That trust factor is obviously one, but what were some other things that caused not only customers to stay with you a long time but employees as well?
Well, I'd like to take that in two pieces. Let me start with the employee part, and then I'll go to the other one. Back to the other one, I guess. Um, So from being in that position of sales and having salespeople work for me, as well as sometimes sales support engineers and field salespeople and inside salespeople, it's a matter of treating them like you wanted to be treated, or I wanted to be treated then. And leading from the middle, I think you've heard of that, right? With middle management and stuff, it doesn't even if you're middle management or executive management, you always have somebody above you. You have a board of directors, you have a spouse, you have somebody who's over you, who's you're responsible to. And you have the people that are working for you, that there's a responsibility there. And that's where everybody's got to remember when you're in that between spot, working for others and then managing others, is that it is not a balance really. It's always doing the right thing. And sometimes, there's people joke around because I have lots of philisms, but and and one of them is, if used honestly, the most important tool you have is a mirror. And that way you look in there, you say, are you doing the right thing all the time for the people you're working with? And so you have your corporate goals, and then you need the people that have to achieve those goals, for the part you're responsible for. And if they're not being treated properly, and if, there's the line, you should be able to step in and do whatever they need to do. Well, that's not possible because I don't have all the skills. No manager does that. Their people have. That's why their people are in those positions.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the best manager might be an accountant who's responsible for a sales organization at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that accountant wasn't going out and making calls through his or her career. So but what they did know, and the reason they stayed with me is that I always had their back. And I would fight for them when they were right. I would help them when they were wrong to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I would, make sure that we were doing everything we could to achieve the company's objectives. And I had people that worked for me through many, many reorganizations, and they were with me for more than 15 years. Not
Wow,
just one person, but like the majority of a team.
that's amazing.
And it really comes from I had people that wanted to get into the organization because we had a good team. We supported each other. They fought,
Mm.
we fought with each other all the time, but God forbid somebody should attack anyone from the outside,
Yeah,
because then they rallied around each other.
absolutely.
And so it
Wow,
was great. So how
that's
was
amazing.
that? How'd I do?
No, that's man, that is such great advice. Um, and with customers,
Yeah.
you talked about trust.
Yep.
What are some other things with customers?
So with customers, it's about being there when they don't need you.
Mm,
Okay. So everybody's there when they're needed. And um, there's lots of stories there when you show up when they need help. So one thing that customers really appreciate is that you sincerely care about their business and that you're always watching out for them. So, that's a claim and everything else when you say it, but it's how you practice it.
mhm,
So a good example of this is when you come up with an idea or you see something that could help them, whether it's something you sell or not, you go see them. You call, I got a great idea. I think this could help you out. I know about this problem you've been dealing with for a very long time. This is going to be great. And I tell you, they appreciate it and they remember it and it's sincere. You're
mhm.
always there. And when I talk about being there when nobody else is there, here's a really good example under a really terrible circumstance. So I was working, once again, I was a sales manager running the government group and a salesperson working for me. And we had another very large project for NASA down at Kennedy Space Flight Center. And during this project, the second shuttle disaster happened.
Mm,
And it was a terrible thing. But it shut down that project and most of NASA's um, purchases and everything else for over 2 years.
mm.
But during that time, we were still there. We were always going back for 2 years. We weren't getting a penny out of it and anything else. And do want to make sure that everybody knows your product still needs to be good. Your product or your service still needs to be good. It doesn't matter how much they like you. They'll
Yeah,
see you, but they won't buy anything from you.
right.
So your product service has to be good. It has to be reliable. It has to be state of the art. And so you have to have all that going for you. Unfortunately, I work for really good companies with really good products and services. Um, and then so we were technically compliant and we made it down to the end. But one of the things that I was told during the evaluation, you have to win financially in every other way, as they said. But Phil, you guys were here when nobody else was.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
many others just abandoned us during these past years because we weren't spending anything, but you guys were here all the time. You were working on this project. You were doing it. You didn't get a penny out of it. And we're happy that you were able to win the award.
Wow.
And that
Yeah.
was just from one client, but there's many others with stories, but that one's an easy one to picture
Yeah.
on, the magnitude of that problem. And then there
Wow.
was 9/11 stories, which is a whole different animal in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, Phil. I love that story. I loved everything you said. I want to go down a road with you now, though, and really start to tap into your expertise on sales coaching. But I want to start with something from my past, where as a training manager, we had heard gotten wind that the operations folks were um, saying that if a sale couldn't close, they wanted the manager to go over and close the sale because the manager is the best salesperson in the store. And I felt like that was really backwards. I felt like, the manager should be the best sales coach in the store, not the best salesperson. If they are, they're doing something wrong. What are some of your thoughts on that, and how do you prevent that from occurring, from happening?
So that's a really interesting situation, and I certainly could envision it. Um, and it's a fallacy. I mean, when you look at, let's take we're recording this at the end of 2023, getting close to the NFL playoffs, the football playoffs, right? And
Hmm.
some of the best coaches out there never played the game at
Yeah.
that level for sure, but
Yeah.
they're great coaches, right?
Yep.
So just because somebody's the manager or an excellent coach or excellent manager doesn't mean that they're an excellent player. And even if they played quarterback, they couldn't play middle linebacker, but but they're responsible for the whole team, right? So
Mhm.
it's the same thing in sales and in management. And this pretty much holds true, I guess, for just about any management position and situation, or whatever the role, that to your point exactly, you want to bring the manager in to help answer questions where you may not be able to, or if you as a salesperson are struggling in some particular way relative to product knowledge or company insight, or maybe it's just some decision that requires the next level. That's when you want that manager, because the problem when the manager, you're dependent on the manager, goes even beyond what you're leaning into there, Kenny, is that people lose confidence in the salesperson at that point.
Mm.
And once the manager comes in and becomes the highest point of contact, they just want to deal with the manager because of the manager's level. And I used to joke when people used to call me up. I said, You're calling me to get an answer?" I said, I'll help the salesperson, but if you want the right answer, you need to talk to the salesperson
Yeah.
because they know the details of what's going on here.
Yeah.
But that's more of a problem of you're even if your sales manager is a great salesperson and maybe is the best salesperson in the building, they're still not the right role. They've got the job to manage the business, and you need to count on the salespeople. So if your salespeople, if you don't have the confidence of the company that you work for, then you need to revisit what are your criteria, not only for hiring salespeople, but for training them. Because as a
Mm.
company and as a manager of people, middle manager up, your responsibility is to make sure that they're properly trained. Their
Yeah.
job is to execute properly. Yours is to properly train.
Yes.
And so, um, so I really have a little bit of a problem with the situation that you were in, because it's a crutch. It doesn't build confidence in the salespeople. You don't want to lose any sales,
Hmm.
ever, unless they're bad sales. You could have bad sales. You don't want to ever
Sure.
make. But that's my answer. So I would say make
Yeah.
sure your people are trained so you don't ever have to do that. You use your manager for the upline when you need the upline, but
Absolutely.
certainly not for every time that there's a struggle on a close. I mean,
Yeah.
if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I can't agree more. You really laid it out beautifully. Um, what's your definition of sales coaching, Phil?
So a great question. And this is one area that I explain quite a bit. And mine and what differentiates me, because there's a lot of great coaches out there, but I tell everybody sales training is really important. And there are many, many great sales programs out there that you could invest in, and training programs. And there's many very excellent sales trainers out there that you can invest in. What I do as a coach, though, is I work with people from the moment we start working together in a client coach relationship. I work with them on their needs where they are right now. They should be able to have a takeaway, if something implementable after every single meeting that will make their situation better than it was before we started talking an hour ago.
Mm.
And so the tagline I use is that training is really important, but training doesn't include coaching. However, coaching always includes training.
Mm.
So if you had a situation right now yourself, Kenny, where you're having trouble getting this to the close, let's say, so you're at the end of the sales process, and you need help right there. If you were just going into a training program, you would start at the opening where you learn how to get in the door, and then you go and how to ask questions and all the way through. By the time you got to the part where you needed today, you would have already lost that business,
Mm.
very likely. And
Mhm.
the other extreme is if your trouble is getting in the door and your training program is beginning someplace in the middle or the end, because they're generally linear, um, then they're focused on all these other processes, from question answering to moving to the close and all that other stuff. But your challenge is getting appointments and getting in the door and minimizing your rejection,
Mhm.
making higher quality targeted calls. Every client I work with is starting at a different point,
Mm.
but the training goes on all the way through.
Mhm.
So that's how I explain. So, training is important. Coaching comes with training. Training very rarely comes with coaching. And I'm being diplomatic when I say very rarely. I think it's
Yeah.
almost never.
Almost never. Yeah. Wow. And Phil, that was that's one of the best definitions, the best definition I've heard of coaching and sales coaching. It makes so much sense. It really does. Storytelling.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
So it's about just, okay. So when we talk about differentiation, let's forget product sales altogether for visualization here. Okay. Let's talk about services. Let's talk about whether you're a CPA or a digital marketer. I like this digital marketing example because it recently happened.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So I was at a business to business trade show. I had a table set up, had my branding on there and what I did. So people knew when they came up to the table, if they looked beforehand. And the story is what differentiates you. So this person came up and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name's Danny." I said, "Great to meet you, Danny." I said, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm in digital marketing." And I said, "So what?" Now I sounded like a real jerk, right? If you took it out of, if you didn't know where I was coming from.
Right.
And it
Right.
certainly got his attention. But the point was absolutely important. And the point is, really, so what? So, Kenny, if I was to ask you, and I'm not asking you, it's rhetorical, name how many digital marketing companies do you think you have within, 15, 20 square miles of your home or your business, right? It would be a lot, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
and did you ever run into any company that brands themselves or advertise themselves, says, "Hey, we're the worst company out there. We don't know what we're doing, and you could do better someplace else, but we want you to do business with us." You
Right.
never hear that. Everybody comes out and says, "We do the best. We do everything. We do this. We do that." In or broad based or whatever. So everybody's saying the same thing, right?
Yep.
So I know this is a long answer to a short
No,
question, but it is
please.
about the
Yeah.
storytelling. The
Yeah.
storytelling is what differentiates you from everybody else. People will remember your story. So what I asked them to do is I said, "Tell me about the sale that you made or the customer client you have that you're singularly most proud of under 1 minute. Tell me."
Mm.
And he said, "I had this client. She has a business. And when I started working with her, she had no sales, none. And then now she's doing $40,000 a month in top line revenue." And I said, "Well, there's a story. So here it is. Here's a story." So now when people ask you what you do, you say, hey, my name's Danny. So you're asking, what do I do? I'll let you know. Here's a story for you. I have this woman. She had a business. She had no sales. We worked together for whatever that period of time was. And now she has top line sales of $40,000 a month. So what did you like about what I just said? What caught your interest? And they're going to say, "I'm amazed. How did you do that?" And you're going to say, "That's what we need to get around and talk about so I can learn more about your business. And I'll share the details with you on that one when we get together. When's a good time to get together, tomorrow or the next day?" And that's literally changed the difference. The stories make the difference. Today, you asked me some questions and I told you a story. I told you a story about NASA, and I told you the other story, right? And if you're thinking about me later on down the road, there'll be maybe a couple of these details that you mentioned that you liked, but you'll remember the stories. And
Yeah.
that's what differentiates you.
No doubt.
Storytelling is the most, And everybody's got stories. They just need to think about it. Even if they're starting out brand new, whether they've started out right out of high school or college or wherever it is, they have stories on how they help somebody that's relevant to what they're doing now.
Wow, Phil, that is and you're so right, because we remember stories, we absolutely do, but they also validate what you're there for,
Right.
this has been amazing. I've got one other regular question to ask you, and then I want to spend time for how folks can connect with you. We're right at the end. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that we're at the end of this year, 2023, going into 2024. What would you say in this realm of sales coaching? What would be a couple of key must-have skills that leaders have in this changing landscape of business going into 2024? What's your advice on just a couple of skills in this realm of sales coaching that leaders have to have?
So it's a really great question because technically things have changed. COVID changed how you do things.
Yeah.
9/11 changed how you get in and can't get into businesses anymore. Everything else. So here's my thing. One is if you have to make the calls. If you don't make the calls, they're not going to come. And and if you have leads, if you're fortunate enough from a marketing standpoint to have somebody that's generating leads for you, you have to follow up with them right away. They're cold very, very quickly. In a day or two, they can be totally cold.
Yeah.
So, but the most important piece of advice I could give is there's a process to selling. The process hasn't changed since Dale Carnegie wrote it originally. It is still the same process. And you go through the process. How you get there sometimes is technically different, but follow the process. Ask very good questions. Be curious all of the time. If you're sincerely curious about what it is and you're driving down, for those of you who are in sales management, you've heard of the dominant buying motive. When you drive to the dominant buying mode, the real reason they want your service or need your service or your product offering, that's what you're selling to. But follow the process all of the time. It hasn't changed.
Mm.
It's just how you implement it may change, and what you need to know technically and socially, like because people today, I mean, we were different than our fathers and mothers, than our grandmothers and grandfathers, and now that I am a grandparent, my kids and their kids are also different than we were. So you need to be in the moment where they are. So how did I do? Did that answer your
Oh,
question?
oh my gosh, yes, it did. And that's priceless advice. It really is. And I just think that so much has changed, and you nailed it, because COVID really gave us a different world. And I hadn't really thought much about 9/11 of recent until you started saying, yeah, you're right, man. Business changed so much, and I'm on Long Island here, so I always worked in New York City. And forget it, you couldn't go anywhere,
Right.
and you kind of still can't. Phil, you're amazing. You're an
Thank you.
amazing leader and coach. And so thank you for all that you've given in this half hour or so. It's been amazing advice. And I want people to get more of you. So how can people connect with you and work with you?
So how they could connect me with the best and easiest way would just go right to my website. You could go to the contact us page, and that is been there, all one word, BENTHERECS, is in consulting services, beentherecs.com. And I ask a favor. I'm kind of new to the social media thing. I'm always having to do it myself with my own business, where I always had people working for me. So I'm learning all this stuff. But if you would follow me at been there CS on Facebook and Instagram, that would be wonderful.
Mhm.
And I've got a very large LinkedIn presence. I have had for a long time. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I want to encourage everybody to do that, to take advantage of this amazing leader who brings so much energy and positivity to the table.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. This has been incredible. I can't wait for other folks to hear it, man. So I so appreciate your time.
Oh, and I appreciate you once again asking me. It was great. Enjoyed the questions, and they were pointed, and it was perfect. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. We're going to leave it there, folks. This has been Kenny and Phil. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.